I'm Elaine Ubiña, co-founder of Fairfield County Look with my husband, Chi. We are very happy to have you all here with us, and we are recording this, so we will send the recording out to everybody and to people who couldn't attend today. It'll go on our email blast as well as to the people who asked for recordings, so we're thrilled with that. We are very happy to have Tracy Fox back here to answer your Ask the Coach questions. Chi and I have had a transformative experience by consulting with Tracy over the last, I don't know, not long time, probably short 3 to 4 months. She is on target with everything. We talked to her about business, family, marriage, menopause. She asks the right questions and gives very matter-of-fact answers. Her feedback is fantastic, and she works very quickly. It's great in a short period of time, especially during this COVID thing, to get things flushed out and on track, especially with family. As we all know, we've all been either stuck with our kids or stuck with our husbands or whatever, not seeing our friends. And it's just been amazing. So I hope you all enjoy the session, and we're thrilled to have Tracy with us. So now I am thrilled to introduce our moderator, Demetra Ganias, who came to us also as a COVID angel. We started working with Demetra last spring, and we launched Look Video. Demetra is a public speaking coach. She is, you'll see her on her own Instagram lives, as well as on her new podcast called Get Louder that she's doing. It's fantastic. So subscribe to that. It's really talks about everything. So definitely get on that. And very put to kick you off. So go for it, Demetra.
Elaine, thank you so much. This is going to be a fun and interactive time together. We're so excited to ask the coach, Tracy Fox. This has just been a long time that we've been in this abnormal place in our lives. So there's a lot to get to. But first I want to tell you about Tracy. She literally wrote the book on being happy. In fact, 4 best-selling books, and she is an NYU certified executive life coach. We need it all. Tracy's been sharing happy strategies for more than 20 years, and she is a sought-after therapist and motivational speaker. We are thrilled to have her expertise today. Tracy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Demetra. I'm super excited to be here, and I love the format, and I can't wait to get to the questions.
Lots of questions. So there's an overarching theme that we're going to start with. Let's go to anxiety. Everyone's feeling a bit like they're in a free fall. You know, we had this timeline in our minds of when this COVID thing might be over, and it keeps going and going. Talk to us about how to rein that anxiety in.
All right, well, let's start with what anxiety is, because anxiety is all about I'm looking back to something I did or said or regret, and that's about 20% of it. And of course, 80% of anxiety is looking forward to, oh my gosh, what is going to happen? There's uncertainty. I don't know what's happening. I don't like it. I'm not sure how I'm going to respond. And so if you think about that, the antidote to anxiety is staying in the present moment and taking back your personal power. Because the truth is, and I say this all the time in coaching, either you are managing your life or your life is managing you. And even with this COVID situation, you have to make a decision, and you say to yourself, I'm going to manage this. I'm not just going to allow my daily life to, take over, and then I'm just simply reacting to everything. You want to stay in intentional mode. And the way you do that is to decide, either with yourself or with your family, how do we want to operate during COVID? Because you're right. The way stats are right now, we're probably looking at next summer before we sort of get back to normalcy. So how can we have the best next 9 months of our life? And if you get into management mode, there's really nothing to be anxious about.
Okay, so let's stick to that idea of just grabbing back control. We can't go where we want. We can't do what we want. We can't see who we want to see. What is this sort of exchange we're having with our brain about, I want to do this, but I can't? How do we sort of calm it down so we don't feel so powerless?
Well, again, it goes back to what you're going to focus on. And as we know, what you focus on expands. So yeah, you can focus on all the things you don't have. But we know the key to success in life is to focus on what you do have. And that is why gratitude, journals have taken off. I just did one myself. And why Oprah started, she really plugged into this several years ago about that she became a gratitude person and that what you focus on expands. So look around, what is going well? And again, you can look at it any number of ways. You can look at it as, well, the kids aren't in school as much, or you can look at it as, hooray, I get to spend more time with my kids. And that's a precious gift because life is very short. So everything is, one, what can you do about it is answer number one. But answer number two is, how am I going to look at the situation? And I will say the other thing that I always want to impress upon people is they don't realize their own personal power. You get to decide. We're the only creatures in the animal kingdom that gets to decide about our lives. And so you can be hit by a car and you can decide that's the worst thing that ever happened to me, or you can decide, wow, this could be the best thing that ever happened to me because I'm going to get to spend more time at home and I'm going to take that break I always wanted to take. So everything is how you look at it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. And I want to talk about resources for changing that perspective. You started the Happy Self podcast, and that is a tool for people to listen to expand their ability to grab onto happiness. Tell me about that medium and how we each have to do that something new, that different step to sort of get something out of this time instead of looking at it as lost time.
All right. Well, thank you for the plug on Happy Self, and I'll go there first. So I decided to do the Happy Self podcast because, one, podcasts are exploding and it's a great way to get a quick amount of information, while you're driving to school or while you're making breakfast. And the reason I did the Happy Self podcast and wanted to really focus on, you're right, what exactly can you do? And it's interesting because yesterday I interviewed Scarlett Lewis, and I don't know if any of you know her or remember her, but her son was murdered at Sandy Hook Elementary School. And she went on to overcome that tragedy, which puts that in perspective for all of us, and then do something amazing with it, which is start this foundation called Choose Love. And the entire, philosophy of her organization is, in every spot in life, you get to choose. How am I going to handle this situation? Am I going to say something mean, or am I going to take the high road? How am I going to react to everything? And all day long, we're presented with opportunities to choose love, or to take the high road, or to do the gracious thing. And I think that is the key to life, no matter what is facing you, is, again, deciding to live your life by principles. And I think it might be the third podcast I did one called Live by Principle or Live by Preference. And so you can get up in the morning and just live by preference. Well, all my friends are doing this, so I'll do it. Or, hey, everybody's drinking, so I'll drink. Or everybody's using profanity, so I'll use profanity. Or you can live by principle, which says, I don't want to drink during the week. I'm going to make a principle that I don't drink Monday to Friday because I think that's going to serve me. Or I'm going to make a principle that no matter how people treat me, I'm going to be nice back to them. So you can live by principles, and it's such an easier, cleaner, better way to live.
I love it. There's no beating around the bush with you, Tracy. It's perfect.
Thank you.
So I want to switch gears a little bit to a topic that involves both marriages and friends, and that is politics. We are in the middle of it, less than 3 months to go. And a question from someone asked, what do you do to get along with a husband or partner or friend when you differ politically and you have very different ways of thinking, but you just need to get along? It's not about changing the other person. They want to know, how can I just get through the days and get along when we see things completely differently?
Okay, love this question, and I have an answer. And it's good for your friendships, it's incredibly great for your marriages, and it's going to be great for politics too. So most of us, when we come across someone that thinks differently, especially our husbands, we don't like it. And we have an implicit thought like, oh, why are they so different? Why can't they see my point of view? And I say do the opposite. Make implicit things explicit. And what I have learned to do even in my own marriage is to say, have some humor about it, like, wow, we really think differently, and that is a good thing. And if you say it out loud to each other as opposed to, well, we think differently, no, we think differently, and that's a good thing. It makes our household more exciting. You put it out there, and then you go from that spot. Tell me what you think, and they say something you completely disagree, but you say, okay, I hear you, but I disagree. Here's what I think. And then you brainstorm for common ground. We're so used to being in fight mode all the time and having to prove ourselves right, but it doesn't solve anything. And this is a great strategy for marriage too. And I give the example a lot when I speak to groups on marriage, which is if your husband loves camping and you love staying in a 5-star resort, right? You can do a couple things. You can say every time you go camping, this blows, and every time he goes to the 5-star hotel, we're spending too much money. You can do that route. You can do the middle route, which is you go camping, I'll stay home and go to a 5-star hotel. Or you can say, we do not agree on this, but we're clever people. So why don't we do 2 days at the campground and then check into a 5-star hotel for another 3 days or whatever it might be. And then you go graciously to the campground and really see it from your husband's point of view. And then he comes and really gets, some fun and enjoys the $20 cocktail at the 5-star hotel. And you learn to enjoy each other's point of view. We don't always have to be in fight mode, and we don't have to be right. Lastly, never be right in marriage. And I'll tell you why. Because when you're right in marriage, that means your spouse is wrong. And when you make people feel wrong, the relationship's over.
All right. So try a new adventure and get the ego out of the way.
Yes. And brainstorm for solutions.
Okay. I'm going to stick to this marriage.
Yeah.
I want to ask because prolonged time together inevitably leads to more conflict, which in many cases leads to divorce. So here we are. We're in this after several months, and a lot of couples are getting divorced. They just haven't seen you yet, Tracy. What do you have to say to them?
Well, I have 2 things to say. One is if you haven't gotten divorced and you're thinking about it, do not get divorced. At least until you earn your way out of the marriage. And what I mean by that is you just really haven't tried everything yet. And you really need to go, I call it going back to the kitchen table. There's just too much at stake. There's money. If you have children, there's the fragility of their little lives. There's your own self, happiness. And there is always a way to solve a problem, but people give up too easily. People think, and again, let's go back to a marriage vow, for better, for worse, for richer or poorer. And people get into a worse situation and they think, well, boy, it's been a month and we're not getting along. That is not how you look at it. For better, for worse means worse could be a year. But you keep going back to the kitchen table, or you hire me, and I am really good at this. I think I have a 100% success rate with marriages. Or you go to a therapist you like, but you cannot give up. There's just too much at stake. Now, of course, are there exceptions to that? Of course, if you're living with someone who abuses you, you have to get out. If you're living with someone who won't give up the girlfriend at the office, yeah, obviously, you're not sticking around for that. So obviously there are extensions and exceptions, but I beg people to go back and try it again. And really, you should try it with me. I am exceptionally good at solving people's marital problems.
Okay, that leads me to one more question about this. If my spouse says, I just don't want to go talk to Tracy. I am embarrassed. I don't think it's worth it. I don't think it's going to work. How do we convince the other half to come along for the ride?
I get that all the time. And I get it more, and again, exceptions, but I get it more from wives telling me their husbands will not do it. And I understand that completely, because husbands believe a lot of the time, and yes, there are women who believe this too, that we're going to be going down a path of feelings, and the whole thing's going to be about feelings, and there's going to be no concrete action or decision. So what I tell women and or men who want their spouse, their wife, is don't make it this big thing that they can't get out of. Say, would you be willing to try one session? And if you do not like it, fine, then you don't have to go back. At least with me, I've never had one person try one session and not come back. And that's what we do when you're sending a kid to camp. I always used to do that with my kids. Go for a week. If you hate it, you can come back. And, once they're there long enough, they end up loving it. It's the same thing is true here. So, yeah, in terms of convincing, there's too much at stake. And that's the other thing, show your spouse what divorce is really going to look like, or talk to people who are divorced. It's not a fun time. You have to split all your money. You see your kids half the time. You're still having to spend all your time together co-parenting. So it's not like you're solving all those problems. It's better to go in and just solve the issues at hand. And lastly, and I want to say this because it's important, if you really want to solve your marital problems, put away the microscope and get out the mirror. This changed my marriage completely. So what that means is next time you're in a conflict with your spouse, instead of saying, well, no, you, say to yourself, how am I showing up right now? Yes, this person is annoying me, but am I being kind? Am I being gracious? Am I willing to brainstorm with them? The minute you get out the mirror, you can do amazing things in terms of transforming your marriage and or your friendships or whatever it is.
Okay, that is a strategy. I love it. I'm going to put aside marriage for a second, but it doesn't mean you cannot add more questions or comments in the chat box. I am monitoring whatever it is that comes up for you. We are going to go there. Tracy, I want to move on to something about how do we make good boundaries in this time of COVID with people who don't agree or follow or respect what we think is proper as far as masks, as far as gatherings. We are coming up onto Thanksgiving and holidays. What if people in the family just don't see eye to eye about the correct thing to do?
Yeah, this is a tough one. And again, because your health is at risk and things like that, this is a much more serious thing. And I just think everybody's going to have to decide what they're comfortable with. They're going to have to be very assertive. And let me give you my definition of assertiveness. I speak my truth, but I always do it with love and respect. So when you're assertive, you say what it is, you do it with love and respect, but then yes, you keep those boundaries. And that's the only thing you can do, because every family member is going to have a disagreement about what's right and what's wrong, but you have to do what's right for you and your family, and especially your health, because as we know, COVID is a tricky thing. Some people get it and they're fine. Other people get it and they're long haulers, and other people get it and they're in the hospital and they die. And it's like Russian roulette with your life.
Yikes. Okay. So if I make a decision for me and my family, how do I share that? Because I have a question that says, how do you deal with the pushback and say no gracefully, both in this situation and let's make it in general? How do we set those boundaries for ourselves, even if everybody else isn't happy?
So I love this question, because when someone asks a question, I get that a lot in coaching about how do you say no? And this question is even better, because the question is, how do I gracefully say no? The answer is that you are probably, based on the question, because often the question predicates the answer, the person is probably afraid of other people's reactions. Because if you're afraid to say no, and you're even wondering, how can I say it gracefully? That means you're actually afraid of how people might react to your saying no. And so I always say to people, it's not your job. Meaning, it's not your job to worry about how other people react. Your job is to stay on your side of the street, say your truth, do it with love and respect, and then let the chips fall where they may. And let me add something else, and I'm going to go deep here for a moment. But if you're also worried about other people's reactions, that seems so charitable. Like, I'm a really nice person and I don't want so-and-so to be upset. It's actually not charitable. What it is selfish. And I'll tell you why. Because when you're so worried about other people's reactions that you don't even give them the chance to respond to your no, that is selfish, right? Because it's saying, well, I'm not even going to give them a chance to respond because I'm too afraid of what they might say. So I'm not going to say anything. Everybody's an adult. Let people respond the way they want, and then you can respond in kind. Again, just keep it in the framework of, accountability and doing it with respect and love.
So it's almost like we're trying to protect ourselves from something that we don't even know is going to happen.
Well, you're trying to, yes, that, and you're also trying to protect the other person, because you're thinking to yourself, well, if I say no, I already know in advance they're not going to like that. And so you're doing this, you're playing both sides of the relationship. It's not a good idea. Never play both sides of the relationship. Stay on your side of the street, do what you got to do, but do it with love and respect.
Stay in your lane. I like it.
Yeah.
Here's a question about the big picture here. A lot of people are reevaluating their lives. What are their priorities? What do they want to stick to in life? At what age is it too late to go back to school, to try something new?
Well, I mean, if anyone knows me, they already know the answer to this question, because I start my book, Happy Self, with this quote, which is, life is a one-time offer. Use it well. And I don't think people step back at the 40,000-foot view on their lives, which is, if you're lucky, and we're all lucky here, we get somewhere between, 50 and 75, 80 years on planet Earth, right? I mean, that is not a long period of time. And so you have to really look at your life as tick tock, every day it's getting shorter. And so I say, jump in. If you're excited about going back to school, that's a great thing. Be enthusiastic about your life and go do it. And if you do well, great. And after a week, you decide you don't like it, then quit. And I was just saying this in a podcast, we were talking about college kids. And the best advice I give college kids is if you're shy and you're new, do the opposite. Try everything. Sign up for every club. And then 2 weeks later, then yeah, this wasn't for me, but get yourself out there, enjoy life, be enthusiastic, do what makes you happy, and try new things for sure.
Okay, I'm going to piggyback off that. Someone asked, how do I discover my true purpose in life? Is there such a thing?
Yes, there absolutely is such a thing.
Okay.
May be many purposes. It might not just be one true purpose. There may be many purposes. But again, and here we go, we're going to go deep for a moment. You cannot know where you're going if you do not know where you are, right? Like a GPS, you can't put in the destination without telling the GPS where you are. So, and most people just want to know where they're going. They have no idea where they are. And so what I tell people is before you ask the question of where I'm going, find out who you are and get out a piece of paper. And I would start with 3 columns. One is, what do I really love to do? Column 2, what am I good at? Because those things have to intersect.
Right.
And then 3, and this is whether it's you're being paid or not, but if you're being paid, what is someone willing, to pay me? Or are they willing to pay me? And if it's just a vocation and you don't care about the money, then you don't need that column. And then the 4th thing is ask everybody you know, because we're not always great self-reflectors. So ask everybody, right? Don't say, well, so-and-so, I don't know. No, ask everybody. What do you think I would be good at? What do you think I'm called to do? You'll be amazed at the answers you get. And then you're not alone brainstorming by yourself. So ask your mother, ask your coworkers, ask your children, ask people, the postman. It doesn't matter. Ask everybody what they see you doing. And you'll be absolutely amazed at the pattern you see, and the answer is there. But you got to know yourself first before you then decide where you're going.
That's an interesting perspective because I would think, I'm not going to ask anyone else. I have to go out there and do this. I know what I'm good at. And I would never think to trust all those other opinions, but I like that vulnerability in asking.
Well, I remember, it's interesting. My brother said to me once, your best quality, Tracy, is that you're very sensitive, and that can get you into trouble. And people probably don't know that about me, but because I'm so sensitive, I observe a lot of things, right? Now, I never thought of myself as sensitive, but when he said that to me, it was so helpful in me deciding to also, really follow this path of becoming a life coach, because I was like, yeah, you're right. I always, even when I go to a party, I'm an observer. And that has helped me a lot because I really understand human behavior because I'm always observing it. And so even that one thing really helped me. And so again, yes, asking other people, because you may not always have a correct view of yourself, especially people are so hard on themselves. They do not have a correct view of themselves.
Okay, that is eye-opening. Building off of that, when we're trying to think of what we need to do in life, what we want to do in life, we often put things off. We're great procrastinators, and a pandemic compounds our reason to procrastinate. So whether it's clean out the closet or do go back to school or just take care of that landscaping issue, whatever trivial to enormous item we have in our mind, how do we deal with it and stop putting it off?
Okay, so 2 things. One, episode 17 of the Happy Self podcast, I did a whole 45 minutes, I think, on procrastination. And I'm only saying that because we only have a few moments here, but I really go in deeply into solutions for this. But 2 interesting things about procrastination. One is the psychology and the neurology behind it. And what we do know about procrastination, and this is for people who have a serious problem with it, is it all comes back to feelings, right? And so if I get up in the morning and I know I'm supposed to take a run, that doesn't feel that good. And then I see a glazed donut, and that does feel good. A warm cup of coffee and a glazed donut feels better than taking a run. And people who really have a problem with procrastination don't have a braking system on their feelings. And so what happens is the run seems almost impossible for them. So we're talking about someone who really has an issue with procrastination. And I'm saying that for anyone in the group who does, because you have to take your feelings out of it. You have to trump your feelings with your logical thought, which says the run is better and I'm not going to allow my feelings to take over. Most people don't have that issue, but for people who really procrastinate, starting something can feel like they're climbing Mount Everest. And anyone who doesn't have that problem will say, no, they're just lazy or they're just not disciplined. It's not true. They really have an issue with it. And I want everybody, if you have children like that, you have to really be compassionate and empathetic around that and understand it might be that. But in terms of actual practicalities, there's a couple things you can do. One is have an accountability partner. If someone's going to arrive at my door for that run at 7 o'clock, I'm not going to blow them off. If no one's coming and there's a glazed donut, the chances are I'm going to eat that glazed donut and stay home and get back into bed. Okay. Number 2 is break it down. If you mentioned a kitchen, if you have to clean out your whole kitchen, that feels overwhelming. If you decide on a Monday, I'll do the spoon drawer, on a Tuesday, I'll do the refrigerator, that's doable and it works. And then the third thing is attach a reward to it. This helps people a lot. So say to yourself, if I do that whole refrigerator, I will go down to Starbucks and treat myself to a latte. There's something about a reward system that really helps people get things done. So I would say those 3 things are probably the best 3 things.
Those are a lot of good steps. I've jotted all of them down. Thank you. So I want to go to a complete other end and talk about some health issues. Menopause is a tough thing for women to discuss. Number 1, do you feel there is still a stigma about it? Why don't we talk about it? Every woman goes through it. And so how do we deal with A, talking about it, and B, just dealing with all of the issues going on in our body and our life?
Well, like everything, right? What are we getting comfortable with? And it's interesting that we're all comfortable with profanity now. We're all comfortable with a lot of things, but we're not comfortable with talking about menopause, just our society in general, right? And so we have to decide what we want to get comfortable with. And I can't remember the name, but I know it's Amy. She's a comic, and she decided to start doing commercials about your period and Tampax because nobody talks about it. And she decided that's ridiculous. Like we have to start talking about this stuff. We're scaring young women and young girls into like being afraid of their own periods. And so she started this whole campaign. And that goes to what you're saying about menopause. Same thing. We have to kind of stop the nonsense. We're all adults here. This is what happens. We go into menopause. And so in terms of strategy, the first thing I would say is call your primary care physician, because obviously menopause is all about loss of estrogen and loss of progesterone. And those things do affect every area of your body, your brain, your skin, everything. So go get the help you need. And then, yes, talk about it with your friends. It's nothing to be ashamed of. We're all in the same spot. So if you're in that, age range, and if you're not, you're going to be. So you might as well get the good information now. Was there a second part to that question?
Someone's asking about increased anxiety during menopause.
Yeah.
Have you found that there's a marked change in anxiety?
Well, definitely. And I think that that's the brain component to what I was speaking about. But of course, the other thing is aging is really not that fun. It can be, and you can look at it as, I've had this amazing life, and what's the alternative? The alternative is I'm dead. So yes, a lot of people do that, but still the pieces of menopause, that aren't great, that, like your skin gets dry and, you're not as active or whatever the 6 million things are, that yes, that can cause anxiety because you feel, especially as a woman, that you're probably not as desirable, et cetera, et cetera. So I do think and any way you can take care of the medical stuff, you should, whether it's taking a multivitamin or going to your primary care physician or, doing more workouts or whatever that makes you feel good. And then the second thing is back to, you've got to control your anxiety and realize and put it in perspective, because if you're in menopause, that means you've lived a pretty good long life, and that's something to celebrate, not something to hide from.
Excellent. Well, that's a really good eye-opening conversation to have. We need to do this more often.
Yes.
Tell me about how we decide when our anxiety has gone too far. So anxiety in general. Are we anxious because this is just a uniquely insane time? Or do we need something to help us? Medication, a therapist, a something. How do we know when we've gone sort of over the edge to needing some kind of help?
Well, again, anything that becomes chronic and becomes a lifestyle for you, and I don't care if that's, anxiety, drinking too much, eating too many chocolate chip cookies, whatever it is, if you're doing something to an extreme, gambling, anything, you probably should look at like what's really going on here. And anxiety is the same thing. If I'm feeling anxious a lot and I'm allowing those thoughts, because part of it is, you start down the rabbit hole and either you don't know how to stop it or you're perpetuating it by continuing to think about it. So you have to decide, if it's feeling like it's too much, yes, it's definitely time to talk to first your primary care physician, or if you have a therapist or a coach like myself, I deal with a lot of anxiety for sure. And then two, of course, there is a neurological aspect to anxiety, and there's a lot of things you can do for it. And I always suggest, and people already know this probably, but there's two great apps you can use on your phone. One is the Calm app, and the other is Headspace. Lots of people love those two. Oprah, George Stephanopoulos, they all use those because there's a lot of anxiety in the work they do. And it allows you to take 5 minutes a day and just put your worries aside and find a calm place. So meditation definitely works. Again, they've proven exercise does amazing things for anxiety because when you move your body, you produce dopamine, and dopamine is the neurotransmitter that controls feelings of well-being. So if you're not feeling great and you're anxious and then you go take a 4-mile run, the likelihood of you feeling better when you get back is very high. Walking in nature, they have found, because nature is so beautifully organized and our lives seem so out of control, that when you take a walk in the woods and you see the beautiful trees and you see how the universe is perfectly put together, there's something very lovely and calming about that. So meditation, taking a walk in the woods, serious exercise, and definitely medication. If that's going to work for you, there is no shame in medication. Medication has come a long way, and it can really, 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 really help you. So definitely speak to someone, and see what your options are.
Excellent. Thank you. I want to ask about a totally different subject. How do I support a close friend going through a hard time who likes to have space and recently feels hurt by me? So someone who wants to reach out and help someone, but they've just sort of been cut off. How do you support them?
So again, I love this question because I do a lot of relationship work, and there's nothing that brings me more joy than when I reunite two friends, or a father and a son, or a family unit. There is nothing more important. And I do think that the reason people feel so cut off is they don't feel understood, right? We all feel judged all the time. So I'll start with that, which is we all have to learn to be better validators. It doesn't mean we agree. It means we can see their side of the story. And I recently coached a father and son, and they were not speaking. And one of the reasons they were not speaking was because the father said, well, I have to do all the work. If I don't call, he doesn't get back in touch. So there's that aspect of it as well. And I always say to people, don't do that. Make sure you're setting it up so that maybe you have a meeting on the calendar every Friday at 9 a.m., father and son will speak. Then it's not up to one person and the other person's hurt or feels they're doing it too much. It's just something on the calendar. You make it sacred space, and it's important to both of you, and you both show up for it. In terms of the actual question, again, I'm a big believer in you start with admitting you were wrong, potentially. Like, hey, I'm so sorry if I hurt your feelings. I really can see that I might have been wrong and not including you. Even if you're not 100% sure that you are wrong, an apology is always such a wonderful place to start, right? And you need humility for an apology. So start with that, and then ask, how can we have a better relationship? How can we get this thing back on track? How can, I help you not feel so isolated? Let people give their own answers, because if we just come barreling in like, well, I think that, you should come to Thanksgiving. Oh, you never come to Thanksgiving. You don't know why that person doesn't want to come to Thanksgiving. Maybe they feel that they're judged at Thanksgiving. Maybe they're afraid of crowds. I have no idea what it is, but you have to ask people. And if you give them the space to answer, they will always speak their truth. Always.
Okay, this is really powerful stuff. I want you to talk to us a little bit more about how you strategize with families. What is the schedule for therapy you set up? How do people go about that? So if there is an estranged relationship, how logistically do you get them back to where they need to be?
So again, I go back to what I said before. If I'm working with, I do two things. One, I do family meetings, and they are very effective because it's amazing how many families do not have the ability to communicate with one another. And I come in and I sit there around the dining table and I let everyone speak. And what you will find when you do a family meeting, whether you do it with me or just do your own family meeting and let people speak, is that they will express themselves and what's going on for them. And that is the only place and the only way you can get to healing, is to let people speak their truth. And then in terms of actual coaching, you know, I do it two ways. One, if I'm just working with one person, literally I have an 8-week session, and in 8 weeks, your life is changed. And why is it changed? Because again, what I am doing in my 8 weeks is I'm giving you the power. I'm not trying to tell you that I have all the answers, because if I give you the answer, guess what's going to happen? You may like it or you may not like it, but you're probably not going to follow through on it. But if you come up with your own answer about how to stop eating or how to get along with somebody, you're going to do it because you came up with it. So we do a lot of going deep, but mostly giving people their personal power, and then the strategies to go on so they never have to talk to me again. I don't want people speaking to me for a year. I want them in and out in 8 to 12 weeks, knowing the next time they get in a trouble spot, they go, oh, that's right, Tracy said we're supposed to sit at the kitchen table and brainstorm, you know, so that they don't always feel like they're therapy bound for the rest of their lives.
Extremely attractive. I mean, the fact that someone can really feel changes and progress in a short amount of time, I imagine that's really the driving force between sticking with it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, you know, it just go back to, I want people to solve their own problems. And if they're not, it's only because they don't know how. There's nothing wrong with them. It's simply they don't know how. And I really am a teacher at heart more than a therapist or a coach, although I pull all that in. What I really am is a teacher, and I'm trying to teach people how to set themselves up for success. And again, nothing more important than a happy marriage and a happy family life. And if I can bring a mom and a daughter together, or a son and a father, whatever it is, who haven't spoken, nothing brings me more joy. And in terms of your question, I had a grandmother who hadn't seen her son in 20 years, and she had been to everyone, like private eyes and therapists. And so I gave her a strategy about how to just get him on the phone, the one I gave you. Are you willing to just come for 15 minutes? 15 minutes. And I said, but when he comes, do not be defensive. Do not, all you're going to do is apologize and say, no, I want nothing more than to have a relationship with you again. And the son was willing to listen. They are back in full relationship. She's seeing her grandchildren, and it all happened in one session. But it happened in one session because she was willing to be humble and say, I'm so sorry, I must have done something wrong that you haven't spoken to me in 20 years. You're never going to find common ground if you come with ego and the need to be right. You have to come with humility.
So Tracy, for those of us who need this, you can do this over Zoom, correct? I mean, it's not just face-to-face meetings.
So, you know, even before COVID, I would say 90% of my meetings were actually on the phone. I actually don't do Zoom. I'm willing to do Zoom if anybody wants to do it, but I find phone much more effective. There's something about just your voice, the two of you. There's really good focus. You're not looking at the background or facial expression or anything. So even before COVID, because I work with people all over the world. So phone is the way I do it. And again, 8 weeks is the magic number. And for marriage, I do this amazing boot camp for marriage. It's 12 weeks. And again, when I do marriage, we're not meeting together. I don't even believe in that, because it becomes about he said, she said. And so you can meet together, but I think it's more effective to meet together, meet separately, meet together, meet separately. Because the only formula that works in marriage is 1 + 1 = 1. Meaning, half plus half equals 1 does not work in marriage. It works in mathematics, but it doesn't work in marriage. Meaning I'm a broken person, you're a broken person, and somehow we're going to complete each other. That does not work in marriage. And 1 + 1 = 2, although mathematically it works, does not work in marriage. Meaning I do me, you do you, we'll have dinner and we'll raise these kids. That never works in marriage, because eventually what happens is you just fall away from each other. The only formula that works is you have an anger problem, I have an anger problem, and together we are going to solve it. You have an eating disorder, I have an eating disorder, and together we're going to solve it. That's how you have to look at it. And there's a lot of issues in marriage, and if you look at it like, hey, we're team players and we can handle anything together, you will handle everything together.
Going a step further, how do we add kids into this mix? How do we get on the same page? Is it those family meetings, or is it a different kind of strategy when you add little kids into the mix, or even older kids?
Well, I'm a big believer in the love languages, and I know that's mostly, you know, people think of it in terms of romance, but love languages work for kids. And I mean, I've got 3 sons, and you know, if I bring one of them a sandwich, well, this is when they were younger, but if I brought one of them a sandwich, they'd be jumping for joy, like, you know, that would be gifts. Somebody else wanted to just sit on the couch and read with me. That meant something to them. And the third child liked it when I spent time with him going to his games. So you have to figure out how people give and receive love, especially with kids. And I think spending one-on-one time and really, again, listening for who they are and allowing them to be who they are. There's that great quote about if you just allow people to grow into who they were meant to be, they will grow into the greatest versions of themselves. But as parents, we can often get very, no, you're going to do it my way, and you're going to only get straight A's, and you're only going to go to this college. And you just box them in, and everybody is different and unique and beautiful, and you have to let people express themselves in the way that's right for them. And so,
okay, this is light bulbs going off for me, because I know about love languages in couples. I had not thought of that for my kids, and I don't know why. It seems so obvious.
Yeah, no, it's a great to really understand, because all kids are different and you cannot treat them all the same. One kid might be super sensitive to something and it doesn't bother the other one. And so you really have to, kids say when you ask them, and again, it all goes back to asking and being willing to listen. Kids will say they want one-on-one time alone with mom and dad so they feel safe to really express themselves. And then, yes, same thing, family meetings. Like, we're all in this together. Like, sit down and, what does little Bobby think about how we should keep the house clean? When they come up with the idea, well, I think we should vacuum on Mondays because, whatever, it's fun, or we should do it during the football game. Whatever he comes up with, then he's going to be willing to do it, versus you saying, get over there and vacuum. Well, yeah, you can do that. It's a shortcut to parenting, in my view. When you're yelling at your kids or you're telling them what to do, yeah, they'll hop too, but I don't think it's the best way to get the most out of your children.
You got to get them invested somehow.
Absolutely.
I'm jumping back to a COVID question from someone who wrote in that their husband is the only one who doesn't follow the rules, and it creates tension in the family. How can we tell him to kindly hear us? Are some parents embarrassments when it comes to this?
Well, I mean, again, I'd have to be there to really know what is blocking him. Is that a belief he has that it's all nonsense? Is it that he feels like he's the head of the household and why should anyone tell him what to do? Again, the one thing I know for sure is when you ask people what is their reason, and give them a moment to answer, you will always get the answer. And I always say this, like if someone says to me, and I don't know if this is the best example, but if somebody says to me, did you hear like Sally's, having an affair with the golf pro or something, right? Like, everybody will sit around and judge that. But if I go up to Sally in a coaching session and I say, well, tell me why you're doing that, there's a reason she's doing it. It's not because she's a bad person. She'll say something like, well, my husband's never home. I'm always alone. We started chatting. He's the first person in 25 years that has noticed me. And I know it's wrong, and she will explain herself, right? And so when you give people a moment, even the most absurd and judgmental thing like having an affair is easily understandable if you actually listen for why somebody is doing something. So to bring it back to the husband and the father, I think that the quickest way to get that answer is to really sit him down and say, could you just explain what your reason is? And hopefully he's not just going to say, because I say it is, or I'm the head of this household, because that's not the real reason, right? And so, again, I don't know if they need to get me involved to find out what the real reason is, but I think you have to find out what the real reason is, and then you can address it.
So let me ask about marriages who have gone the route of divorce. For anyone who is divorced and listening, male or female, what advice would you give for feeling whole and feeling good about your life when you don't have that spouse to come home to, when you are missing that link? How do you get back to feeling 100% after a divorce?
Well, there's two things. And the first thing, I'm just going to address children, because moms especially, and dads too, one of the main feelings they have is the guilt of it, that somehow they've messed up their family. And if you, again, ask kids, and there's great surveys on this, a kid will always say, I would rather be from a broken home than live in one. Let me say that again. A child will say, I would rather be from a broken home than live in one. So if you were at a place where it felt broken and there was no way to get along and there was no peace in the home, your child would rather not live there, right? They don't want to live in chaos. Right? It's like a war zone. So you can feel okay. You have to start to feel okay about the reasons you decided to do this. And then once it's done, you're going to have to sit down and redesign your life. And what does life look like? But again, it's all, to me, everything's about taking the high road. And what does the high road look like? And so get out your friendly piece of paper and your pen and design your life. How can I not feel lonely? Maybe I need to have a Zoom call every, Monday night with my girlfriends. Maybe I need to join that yoga class that I wanted to join. You have to start to think, how can you self-care? I know there's there's lots of support groups, right? There's divorce support groups that people can join. Going to church on Sunday is always helpful, or something like that. These are all just ideas where you have to find a support system. And the reason I mention church is a lot of churches have those divorce support groups. And I think that's an important thing to do. And then you don't feel alone.
Okay. I'm going to bring it full circle for everybody listening because this has been amazing and the time has flown. I want to ask about how to avoid burnout in this time. We're about 8 months into a pandemic. As you said, it's going to be a lot longer. So what can we do in general for everyone listening to really give us the stamina going forward, whether it's something we literally do every day or just a mindset, because we're in this for a while and I just keep thinking of the word burnout.
Yeah. Yes. I would say first and foremost, again, you're going to have to decide what is the meaning of this, because whenever you put meaning on something, right, it takes a completely different, and there's a great book by Viktor Frankl called, it's with me, but something of meaning. What is it?
We'll Google it, I said.
Oh, okay. But it's all about that he was, World War II and suffering and concentration camps. And he was saying the only way to really deal with tragedy or tough situations is you have to give it meaning and purpose. So even suffering and or burnout and or whatever we're going through, if you give it meaning, it doesn't feel like it's so bad. It feels like, wow, maybe there's something here. So I would say the first thing is look for meaning in this. What does this pandemic really mean to you? And can you do something magical with it, right? Just like I said about Scarlett Lewis taking the murder of her child and deciding to do something amazing with it. What can I do with this time? Can I build a better family unit? Can I travel? I heard about a couple that just rented an RV and decided to go see America. They had never seen America before. And they just decided they were going to take this 8 months and discover the beauty of the United States of America. So decide what you want to do with this time and give it meaning, number one. Number two, I would definitely be really intentional about, if you're by yourself, you do it with yourself, or if you have a family unit, sitting at the kitchen table and saying, come on, guys, what do we have? What can we do with this time to make it special and interesting? And how can we support each other? Because of course, we're not always going to be up like this is so great. We all have our down times. And so be super sensitive to it. And then thirdly, I think be of service to others. I said this I did a podcast on loneliness. And I said this, which is, I saw a man walking down the street and he looked homeless. And I jumped out of the car and I said, hello, do you need some help or something? And he said, the hardest part about being homeless is not that I don't have money and I don't have a place to sleep. The hardest part about being homeless is no one ever speaks to me. I'm alone. No one calls me my name. No one cares about me. I don't feel like I have any connections. And the reason I'm telling that story is because it's that's the profound example, but I think we're all feeling that. Like, take a moment and be of service to others. Call somebody, reach out. If we all do that for each other, we will all rise higher. And then we can all feel like, wow, okay, this is not great. At least we're in it together and we can help each other and we can put meaning around it and maybe do something amazing with this time besides what we would normally be doing.
In the end, it's the human connection that we're craving.
Absolutely. Yes.
The name of the book, thank you, Elaine, is Man's Search for Meaning.
Thank you. Yes.
Is that it?
That is it. Yes.
Thank
you.
Tracy, tell us the best ways to be in touch with you. This has been fascinating and wonderful. How can we reach you to learn more, schedule a talk? What should we do?
I appreciate that. The best way to find out everything is to go to my website, tracyfox.net. It is not .com. And actually I've learned to love .net because I call myself like a fisher of people, right? The .net, like I'm trying to rally all these people. So I love that. Listen to the podcast, right? It's on Apple, it's on Spotify. and you'll learn a lot there. And in terms of the coaching, just call me up. My number's on my website, and try one session and see what you think. The one thing I will promise you, and again, I'm not saying it from a bragging point of view, I've just done this long enough. I am really good at coaching, and I really help people, and I enjoy helping people get their lives in order quickly. I do it quickly. 8 weeks for personal coaching, 12 weeks for a marriage boot camp. When you're on the other side of it, you have all the answers and you have all the strategies to move forward. And it is my absolute joy to do it. I love every moment of it. So please reach out. Please reach out.
I'm going to echo that. You are an amazing coach. Thank you. How phenomenal to have these tools that you've given us. We appreciate it so much. Thank you to everyone watching and for your questions. This has been a fascinating hour. Take care and have a great week.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.